Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and we will be heading to the second report of the episode for tonight. One of the main achievements of the 30th of June revolution over the past 10 years are the projects that were implemented in Sinai. About 360 developmental projects were implemented in Sinai and will be further developed in the peninsula with a cost of about 17 billion Egyptian pounds. So we'll be having more details regarding this field in the upcoming report. So stay tuned.
The Ministry of Planning and Economic Development has issued a report on the features of the Citizens Investment Plan for 2022-2023. Hair Said, Minister of Planning and Economic Development, said the Sustainable Development Plan for the fiscal year 2022-2023 pays special attention to policies and programs aimed at achieving convergence in living standards and incomes between regions by addressing existing development gaps and advancing development efforts in accordance with the components, characteristics, and priorities of each region. In this regard, the efforts of development were aimed at achieving integrated rural development to narrow the income gap and limit migration flows to urban areas, and to give high priority to the development of Sinai Peninsula and the governorates of Upper Egypt within the framework of a coherent and integrated development program, in addition to giving a strong development impetus to the promising areas in the governorates to take advantage of existing opportunities and provide more job opportunities for youth. She explained that these directions come in agreement with the Sustainable Development Strategy within the framework of Egypt's Vision 2030 and the consolidation of the principles of human rights in enjoying decent life on the basis of justice and in a sustainable way. She emphasized that the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development is keen to involve citizens in all stages of the development process, which begins with planning, follow-up, and impact assessment. Regarding North Sinai, Said explained that the number of development projects in the governorate reaches 152 projects, and that the value of public investments directed to the governorate in 2022-2023 plan amounts to 7.9 billion Egyptian pounds, an increase of 27.4% over 2021-2022 plan. With regard to the governorate of South Sinai, the number of development projects in the governorate reaches 208 projects, and the value of public investments directed to the governorate amounts to 9.2 billion Egyptian pounds. With regard to the sectoral distribution of targeted public investments in North Sinai, according to 2022-2023 plan, Said indicated that investments amounting to 2.5 billion Egyptian pounds are directed to the transport sector at a rate of 32%. Local development sector investments amount to 1.1 billion Egyptian pounds or 14%. The water resources and irrigation sector amounted to 1.1 billion Egyptian pounds or 14%, and the higher education and scientific research sector amounted to 225.4 million Egyptian pounds or 3%. As for the other sectors, investments amounted to 675 million Egyptian pounds or 8%. On the sectoral distribution of targeted public investments in South Sinai in 2022-2023 plan, the report indicated that investments amounting to 2.5 billion Egyptian pounds were directed to the local development sector at a rate of 27%, followed by the housing sector at a value of 2 billion Egyptian pounds at a rate of 22%, and related to higher education and scientific research at a rate of 1.9 billion Egyptian pounds at a rate of 20%, then health 593.8 million Egyptian pounds or 7%, in the agricultural sector with investments amounting to 509.6 million Egyptian pounds or 5%. Other sectors in the governorate have investments worth 1.7 billion Egyptian pounds or 19%.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and I am honored today to be having with me over the program Dr. Muhammad Abdul Halim, the political analyst. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And happy Eid.
Thank you very much.
Anytime.
To you.
Of course, we are celebrating this week the 10th anniversary of the June 30th revolution against the terrorist Brotherhood organization. I would like to know your opinion about the past 10 years, about the leaps that we have had in terms of diplomacy and the economy as well.
Right. As you might have mentioned right now, that this is supposed to be the 10th, anniversary, 10th year for celebrating the revolution of the 30th of June.
Yes.
A memorable one indeed that would strike a very good example of the solidarity and sense of tenacity actually of almost all the Egyptians who would stand side by side, fortifying the presidential authority actually in decision taking of putting an end for terrorist acts and terrorist actions
Yes.
that lapsed for just one full year, fortunately ended with no return for good. And I think that the turning point actually that did occur during 10 years ago was very much solidifying and very much assisting the political authority side by side with the Egyptian people, who did strike a very good example actually of representing how the people would stand side by side with the armed forces.
Yeah.
We still remember those early days and years actually of the revolution, the 23rd of July of 1952, a sort of a revolution that had been enacted actually by the army assisted by the people, whereas the 25th of January and the 3rd of June actually was commonly regarded and interpreted as a sort of revolution that was to be enacted by the people, fortified and safeguarded by the armed forces.
Yes.
A turning point in the history of modern Egyptian people shaping their own future, the way they would act and react in such a way as to be leading a sort of a life that is very much safe, very much secure, and very much profitable actually in almost all fields after the period of, the dark period of reign during the Muslim Brotherhood as headed by the last Mohammed Morsi actually, who was, striking a very notorious and very bad example actually of
Yes.
turning almost all the prospects and all the gospels and all the tenets and all the future dreams actually of almost all the Egyptians into a very dark tunnel. Fortunately, it's upon the decision of at the then time Colonel General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi actually, who would call almost all the Egyptians actually to stand and to go out and to call for their own emancipation and their own liberation of almost all the previous details of the very dark period of reign that lasted for 1 year during the Muslim Brotherhood actually headed by late Mohammed Morsi side by side with his own disciples and his own friends and his own, collection of Islamists actually who were
Yes.
actually ruling Egypt with all the darkest and pessimistic attitudes. Putting an end for almost all the future dreams of almost all the Egyptians. The period as it stands was very much, important in a transitional link in such a way as to turn all the aspirations for something good, for
Yes.
something very much prospective, something that would entail its own fruits, the sort of the thing that you are gathering at the time being. I still remember those, very dark issues of the revolution of the 25th of January 2011, the sort of the thing that was so called the Arab Spring.
Yes.
That was absolutely actually not in the interests of almost all the people, of the Arab people. It was towards the darkest pessimistic ends actually, had it not been for the advent and interference on the part of the presidential authority actually of the enactment of the revolution of the 3rd of June. That would turn the whole scales actually in favor of almost all the individual Egyptian ordinary citizens, I would say,
Yes.
the simple and rustic ones that are very much believing of their own, honest leadership, of their own presidential authority, of their own armed forces actually, and of the principles that are to be enacted in their own interests actually, instead of the period of the one dark year of reign that lasted actually, despite the fact that it seems to be quite very much short, but leaving its own aftermath and its own darkest targets actually that would leave, very much sad moments in the history of the Egyptians. Fortunately, actually, that after the calling of the then Colonel General Fattah al-Sisi, of his own people actually, to go out and to say their own say and to give him his orders, actually to try to save people and save Egypt from the darkest tunnel, as I would have said.
Yes.
And in the meantime, their own deep belief of the genuine interests and of the very much intact beliefs and working side by side together with their own armed forces, the fact that the Egyptian people are very much fortified with the notion that they are selecting the right man in the right place, in the right direction actually, sort of thing that would get its own fruits actually in the present time situation and in the near future. I still remember actually how the period was against all the aspirations of almost all the Egyptians actually.
Yes.
I still remember that, you know, I mean, during the sitting of Rabah and Nahda, those dark, pessimistic, you know, I mean, reaction against the individual citizens, how people at that time of that Muslim Brotherhood actually, of that, you know, I mean, very much offensive group, are very much deeply solidifying their own interests actually in the light of their own private needs, of their own private instincts, without the least regard of the public interests, without the least regard to almost all the interests of almost all the ordinary Egyptian citizens at the same time. So much so, I would believe that during the time, those who had been, you know, assassinated before the cells and the jails and the prisons, yes, are commonly regarded as criminals. But whereas those who had been, you know, I mean, assassinated or killed actually in Liberty Square may be called as martyrs. The period as it stands was in the history of almost all the Egyptian very much offensive one indeed.
Yes.
And in the meantime, full of tribulations and very much sad endings and tragic and instantaneous deaths and corpses actually.
But we have had the happy ending
Yeah.
on the 3rd
Yeah.
of July.
Sorry for
of
representing
2013.
the darkest side, you
Yes.
know, because I mean it's a sort of transitional link actually that would lead actually to the present
Yes.
moment situation that we are leading
Exactly.
at
One
time.
of the happy endings,
Yeah.
Doctor, as we have had over the past 10 years, was diplomatically, because over the year of the rule of the Terrorist Brotherhood organization, we have had a lot of problems diplomatically outside of Egypt or in the sector of foreign relations. How do you see the change, the development, the leap that we have had in this sector diplomatically and with the foreign relations, with the African countries, with the Middle Eastern countries, with the Arab countries and the outside world in general under the tenure of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry?
Yeah, well, let us analyze the whole political situation on two dimensions. First, the international dimension or the international arena. All diplomatic relations and consulatic ties of Egyptian presidency actually came to a stoppage, came to a halt actually. All the foreign diplomatic relations with almost all the African countries were to be actually, I mean, deteriorated to a greater extent. The sort of give and take dialogue and diplomatic course and diplomatic field, actually, diplomatic level and consulatic tie, came to a great deal of, you know, I mean, stoppage to the extent that almost during that period, I think, and I still remember that Israel was establishing in Africa about 13 embassies, actually, solidifying and fortifying the Israeli and the Jewish relations with the African countries during the lapse of that one full year of the Muslim Brotherhood, actually. A sort of a thing that, you know, I mean, would cast a very dark shadow on trying re-fortification and re-establishing and rebuilding very good intact relations with the African countries. That's why I think during the reign of His Own Excellency Mr. President Fattah al-Sisi and his own first advent to the presidential scene, actually, the first initial thing was not very much directed only to stabilizing the situation from within, but also from without, particularly concentrating on Africa and African countries and African relations. And this would stem out from his own firm belief of, to a greater extent, we had been away from Africa during the previous period of the false assassination of the previous president, Mohammed Hosni Mubarak, in Addis Ababa since, about more than 20 years. All the diplomatic ties of Egypt came to be regarded as very much weakened to a greater extent with African countries. That's why with his own advance, with his own coming, I would say, Mr. President Fattah al-Sisi, I think the first thing on an international level, in an African arena, was to re-establish and to reenact again the sort of the diplomatic ties, and in the meantime to fortify the situation of the Egyptian presidential authority, not only on African level but on European tours and visits. Actually, we had witnessed actually a great deal of international visits of His Own Excellency to a large number of European countries, to United States of America, actually to France, to Britain, and to a large number of other European countries actually that would believe actually that the 3rd of June revolution actually was very much legal one indeed in the eyes of almost all the Western European countries, in much the same way that it seems to be quite intact, almost in the interests of the Egyptian people and of the African country, of almost all the African countries in general. And in the meantime, this is as far as the international level, the whole situation could be clarified. On the internal level, actually, I think that his own first presidential reign was very much concentrating of re-establishing and rehabilitating the situation of almost all the Egyptians, of building bridges of confidence again, of re-establishing their own self-confidence, because well, it's quite obvious, and as much as all our own viewers would know, that during that previous period, again, actually, there was the massacre of Rafah, the first massacre of Rafah, the second, and the attempt of kidnapping a large number of, Egyptian soldiers, of demolishing the infrastructure, of the lack of electricity, of the lack of gas, of the lack of stability, of safety and security on a national level. Actually, this is as far as the situation was very much devastated and demolished from within. That's why with his own advent again, his own Excellency Mr. President Fattah al-Sisi to the presidential scene, he was not directing, as I've just said, his own deep emphasis actually to the international arena actually, with his own presidential tools, but also keeping an eye there and then, in the meantime, on the internal situation in such a way as to try to rebuild and re-establish what had been demolished since the previous period of the previous reign, throughout 30 years of losing consulatic ties, of demolishing the infrastructure, and particularly after the advent of the previous 1 full year of the Muslim Brotherhood, actually, that were, establishing their own future dreams of holding Egypt at their own grip for about 500 years. That was their own aspirations and their own dreams. Had it not been for the advent and interference on the part of the presidential authority to stop all these calamities and all these nonsenses, actually, to establish a realistic dream in the interests of almost all the Egyptian people, actually.
Yes, Dr. Mohammed Abdel Halim, the political analyst. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate, and the Happy Eid.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
And this brings us to the end of a very special episode celebrating the 10th anniversary of the June 30th revolution, and of course the happy ending of it, which took place on the 3rd of July of the same year in 2013. I will be leaving you, however, with the latest presidential activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi over the past week. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi returns home after participating in the summit for a new global financing pact in the French capital, Paris. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi receives Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, at the Ittihadiyya Palace. The visit marks the first of its kind by the Indian Prime Minister to Egypt. President al-Sisi exchanges greetings with the Arab and Islamic states, kings, presidents and emirs on the occasion of Eid al-Adha. In his cables, al-Sisi wished the Arab and Islamic leaders to enjoy peace, progress and prosperity, calling for enhancement and brotherly ties and cooperation among the peoples of Arab and Islamic nations. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi performs the prayer of Eid al-Adha at the Air Force Mosque in Cairo. Through his official page on Facebook, President Sisi extends his sincere congratulations to the Egyptian people as well as to the Arab and Islamic nations on the occasion of the blessed Eid al-Adha. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi delivered a speech to the Egyptian people on the occasion of the anniversary of the June 30th revolution. At the beginning of his speech, he extended his heartfelt congratulations to the Egyptian people on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the glorious June 30th revolution, which coincides with the blessed Eid al-Adha this year. He expressed his hope that God would bless Egypt and the Arab and Islamic nations with goodness and prosperity.